Imagine this. You hop into an Uber, your destination is just a few minutes away, and you're all set for an easy, affordable ride. It's hard to picture the world without rideshare apps like Uber or Lyft, right? They've become so ingrained in our daily lives that it's almost impossible to imagine getting from point A to point B without tapping a few buttons on your phone. But here's the truth. These rideshare giants that once revolutionized the way we get around are struggling, and in some cases, teetering on the edge of financial disaster. Could we really be facing the end of the rideshare era as we know it? It's a story that many are ignoring. Uber, once valued at over $100 billion, now faces a financial mess with declining revenues, lawsuits, and even threats of bankruptcy. So, what happened? Why are these apps that promised to disrupt the transportation industry and make travel so much easier now facing a potential collapse? Well, buckle up because we're about to dive into the real story behind the rise and fall of rideshare apps and what this means for you, the consumer.
Uber and Lyft drivers, they're planning to strike this week. The problem is they're unhappy with declining pay.
We are moving this city and we deserve our fair share.
$20 to $25 an hour. That's what Uber and Lyft will tell you the drivers make on average. Drivers will tell you the reality is much different, even closer to minimum wage.
Major settlement with Uber and Lyft. The New York Attorney General says they've agreed to pay more than $300 million for wage theft.
Investors in Uber are about to make billions. Drivers are making a point, and that could make for a frustrating day for commuters.
The glory days, how Uber and Lyft dominated the market. Let's rewind the clock to the early 2010s. Uber made its debut in 2009, but it wasn't until 2012 to 2014 that it really exploded onto the scene. Lyft followed closely behind, and by 2015, rideshare apps were officially seen as the future of transportation. Cities were being flooded with the drivers and passengers alike, and the promise of affordable, on-demand transportation seemed like a miracle. Uber became synonymous with getting a ride within minutes. No waiting at a taxi stand, no need to call a dispatcher. You opened the app, and voila, a car arrived at your door. It was a dream come true for consumers. The convenience of ride-sharing was hard to beat. Not to mention, Uber and Lyft offered out affordable alternatives to traditional taxis, which were notorious for their high fares and poor service. Both companies promised to change the transportation industry by making rides easier, faster, and more affordable. The media hailed them as disruptors, genius innovators, and the future of urban transport. And to some extent, they were. Uber's rapid expansion and success turned it into a tech powerhouse, attracting billions in funding. Investors were eager to get in on the action, betting big on the future of shared rides. Uber, for instance, expanded to hundreds of cities worldwide, growing its fleet of cars and increasing its driver base exponentially. Lyft, while lagging behind in market share, followed suit. And soon, the two companies were locked in an all-out battle to dominate the industry. But things weren't all sunshine and rainbows in the rideshare world. Underneath the glamour, serious cracks were beginning to show. The financial struggles begin. What went wrong? If you've been following the news, you might know that Uber and Lyft have faced serious financial challenges in recent years. Sure, they're still generating millions of rides per day and millions of dollars in revenue, but the profitability problem remains a big issue. Let's talk about Uber's financial history. After its 2019 IPO, Uber's stock price plummeted, signaling deep investor concerns about the company's future. For years, Uber lost money, and even now, in 2024, the company hasn't posted a consistent profit. So, what's going wrong? First off, driver pay. Uber and Lyft both have a supply and demand problem. The companies want to keep fares affordable for consumers, but at the same time, they need to pay their drivers enough to keep them on the road. This delicate balance is often thrown off by rising operational costs, including insurance, maintenance, and the regulations imposed by local governments. So, while Uber and Lyft are charging consumers, a significant portion of that money goes toward paying drivers, and often, not enough. Then there's the matter of a competition. Despite their initial success, Uber and Lyft have failed to fend off competitors. Gig economy startups like Lyft XL and Get have forced Uber to lower prices and offer unsustainable incentives to drivers, further draining its coffers. In many cities, rideshare services are subsidized by the companies themselves just to keep drivers active. When the competition is fierce, lowering prices to attract more customers and drivers can actually hurt the company's long-term profitability. And let's not forget the legal issues. Both Uber and Lyft have faced numerous lawsuits related to driver classification, whether drivers are employees or independent contractors, which has led to massive legal expenses. Then there's the problem of the taxi regulation in various cities, which often imposes restrictions and the fees that eat into the company's profits. In some cases, rideshare apps have been banned outright or are heavily regulated, cutting off a significant revenue stream. All of this has resulted in massive losses year after year. To make matters worse, Uber, the dominant player, has made some questionable business decisions. Their self-driving car project, for example, ended in disaster after several years and billions of dollars poured into it. Then there's the issue of international expansion, where Uber faced heavy competition from local services that already had a foothold in countries like China and India. That left Uber with little option but to sell its stake in these markets, further depleting its resources. The pandemic impact, the final blow. If the financial struggles weren't enough, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 dealt a serious blow to Uber and Lyft's business models. With people staying home and the lockdowns in effect, demand for rides plunged. This was a major issue, as both companies rely on high volume to offset their operating losses. Rideshare apps had no choice but to lay off thousands of employees, furlough drivers, and slash marketing budgets. Meanwhile, drivers were hit with plummeting wages and unpredictable work hours, leading many to quit the gig entirely. In 2020 alone, Uber lost a whopping $6.8 billion, a result of reduced demand, rising operational costs, and a lack of sustainable profitability. While both Uber and Lyft have since recovered in 2021 and 2022, the pandemic left lasting scars, and many experts are still wondering if the industry can ever return to the levels of success it once enjoyed. The rise of alternatives. What's next for rideshare? As Uber and Lyft grapple with their financial problems, there's an increasing shift toward alternatives that might eventually challenge the dominance of these rideshare apps. The micromobility boom, for example, has led to the rise of e-scooters, electric bikes, and even public transportation apps like Lyft Shuttle that offer shorter rides and eco-friendly options, with increasing pressure to become more sustainable and eco-conscious. Traditional rideshare apps are facing a growing wave of competition. Not to mention, autonomous vehicles are once again a hot topic. While Uber's self-driving car project was scrapped, other companies like the Waymo, owned by Alphabet, continue to push the boundaries of autonomous technology. In fact, Tesla CEO Elon Musk has long envisioned a future where Tesla cars act as self-driving taxis. Driverless cars could be the key to lowering costs for rideshare services, but the technology is still years away from being mainstream. The real threat? Bankruptcy? So what happens if Uber or Lyft actually do go bankrupt? Well, it's not an impossible scenario. Despite their massive market share and billions in funding, both companies are far from stable. The competition is increasing, the legal hurdles are growing, and profitability continues to elude them. Some analysts even warn that Uber could follow in the footsteps of other once dominant tech companies like WeWork, who found themselves on the brink of bankruptcy despite initial hype. For consumers, this could be a major inconvenience, especially in cities where rideshare apps are the primary form of transportation. But the true impact would be felt by the drivers, who rely on these services for their livelihoods. Many drivers have already spoken out about the unpredictable earnings and the lack of support from Uber and Lyft, and a collapse could leave thousands without a job. Final thoughts. Is the end of rideshare near? As it stands, the future of rideshare apps like Uber and Lyft is uncertain. While they're still major players in the transportation market, they face an uphill battle in terms of profitability and sustainability. Whether it's due to competition, legal battles, or the simple inability to keep drivers and consumers satisfied, these companies are at a crossroads. But here's the thing, rideshare apps aren't going anywhere just yet. They may be struggling, but they've also proven that they're adaptable. We could see a future where autonomous vehicles, micro-mobility options, and ride-sharing services evolve to meet the needs of the modern consumer. For now, though, the rideshare story is one that's far from over. So the real question is, what will the future hold for Uber, Lyft, And the rideshare industry? Is it time to say goodbye to these tech giants? Or are they simply going through a rough patch, destined to bounce back? Only time will tell.